Hello and welcome back to Movie Night with Mac, the show with my movie reviews and movie news. I apologize for any issues with the audio quality today. We had some technical difficulties and I'm having to record on my phone. But, we persevere. We're going to be alright. Happy Halloween to everyone. Even though this will probably come out early November, it's still Halloween for me. And we got a little bit of a spooky vibe today, so I just want to say happy Halloween, and I want to jump in straight into the reviews, starting with Joker, Folie, Deux. Now, I don't want to spend too much time with Joker for a couple of reasons. One, I have a lot of other things to talk about. Two, pretty much all the criticism has been made evident both online and through the box office numbers. And three, I really just didn't like it enough for it to leave me with much to say. But starting with the acting, I was pretty disappointed in Joaquin Phoenix. Although he has a little more fun as the Joker, he brings absolutely nothing to Arthur Fleck, who we're with for the majority of the movie. Not only is it nothing new from the first movie, it's really nothing engaging at all. Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn is a little better, but I think her character is just misused. She doesn't really do much, and there's no sense of camaraderie between her and Joker. There's not that dynamic that we see in other versions, other portrayals of these two characters. She just feels like another person, like taking advantage of Arthur by feeding into his delusions. And last episode, I said I was very intrigued to see what place Gaga's vocal ability will play in the musical components of the film, and she's definitely a great singer. She has a great voice for the jazzy vibe of the soundtrack, both the up-tempo and the slower records. But this leads me into my biggest complaint, which is the songs. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in no way a musical hater. When it was announced that the Joker sequel would be a musical, I had my doubts, but I definitely saw the potential. But this is just not how you do a musical at all. With musicals, I think it's okay for the actors to quickly transition into song, even though it may feel a little unnatural. There's sort of a bending of reality with musicals, when it comes to breaking out into song and big choreographed dances. So I think that's okay. But here, when the actors break out into song, it's just so awkward. It's just this very quiet singing while the other person or people in the scene just look at them, and it's so hard to watch. There's a couple songs that I think are actually fun to watch on screen. I remember the song The Joker was an outlier. It's a fun set and an actual musical number with choreography. But yeah, that's about all I got. This definitely didn't need to be made, or just needed better direction. I'm gonna give it 2 out of 5 stars. Next up for October, I watched Saturday Night, directed by Jason Reitman. Saturday Night tells the story of the 90 minutes before the very first episode of Saturday Night Live premiered. Now, going in, I didn't really have any expectations at all. I've never watched a single episode of SNL. I don't know anything about its history or none of that. But my non-existent expectations were definitely exceeded. Now, starting off, this cast is strong. Gabriel LaBelle is an actor that I was unfamiliar with, but he is phenomenal in this movie as Lorne Michaels. Michaels is written somewhat as a crazed perfectionist who's super passionate about the success of his show, and LaBelle fits this role perfectly. Another standout in the cast is Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase. Not only does he look eerily similar to Chase, but he has a very strong screen presence and portrays the actor well, who has a great character arc in the film. For Willem Dafoe, standout is an understatement, by far. He doesn't have much screen time, but he controls the scenes that he's in with a very firm grip. His character is a NBC executive who basically holds the fate of SNL in his hands, and Defoe plays this role with a stone-cold demeanor. The tension between this man and the showrunners is palpable, and you almost feel intimidated by him as the viewer. This is very far from all the actors and actresses who are great in this film, and I wish I could talk about all of them. Rachel Sennett is great, Lamorne Morris is also great but drastically underused. Nicholas Braun has 2 roles and is hilarious in both of them, and J.K. Simmons also has a small cameo, which is great. But I want to talk about the plot and the pacing. This movie is very chaotic, but it's controlled chaos that I love. For example, The Bear is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and the pacing is very similar. It's all over the place, but like intentionally. It knows exactly what it wants to be and the story it wants to tell. The lines are quick and the jokes come at you fast, but you never feel left behind. Everything is in moderation. And since lots of the scenes are so fast, the slower, dialogue-heavy scenes hit harder and they're more suspenseful. The fast pace also makes the movie fly by. It's only an hour and 50 minutes, but I easily could have watched another hour or half hour. It's very easy to digest. The only complaint that I have is the ending. It's a little cheesy, and everything just seems to come together a little too conveniently, but it's something that I can overlook. It didn't ruin the vibe or anything. It was just a little odd. But overall, I was very satisfied with this movie. It was one that I overlooked in the last episode, but I'm very glad I checked it out and got to talk about it today. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And next up for October, I'll be talking about Smile 2. But before I get into this review, I just want to say, please, for the love of God, stop talking so loud in the movie theater. I don't know who needs to hear this, and I can't believe I have to say this in 2024, but nobody is asking for your commentary throughout the entire movie. I think people think it's more okay during a horror movie, either because that's how they have fun with the movie, or they just talk when they're scared. But I promise you, you are not as quiet as you think you are. But anyway, Smile 2. This sequel to the very successful 2022 horror film came out just in time for Halloween, and it does not disappoint. It ramps up every quality of the original, for better or for worse. Starting off, it is much gorier than its predecessor. The first one had some pretty unforgettable gore, but a lot of it was off screen. With the gore in this, there is absolutely no hesitation or backing down from any of it. It is bloody and unashamed. Not to mention the makeup, prosthetics, effects, whatever, look great. The scene with Lucas Gage and the weight is shown in lots of the trailers, but I was still unprepared for just how insane that was going to look. And while we're on the topic of gore, let's talk about the jump scares. They're pretty hit or miss, I'll say. I love a good jump scare, but I hate a bad jump scare. Lots of them are very good. They subvert your expectations. The moment you think you're safe, you get hit with something crazy, but some of them are pretty bad. Like literally just a loud noise out of nowhere that makes zero sense. That kind of pissed me off. But I think the good jump scares outweigh the bad ones. It didn't ruin the movie for me or anything. The cinematography is something that I was not expecting to talk about, but it blew me away. The use of close-ups is incredible. I mentioned this with the gore, but it's really every suspenseful moment where the camera does not back away from what's happening and gets super close to the actor or actress's face. The opening scene is absolutely insane. A spectacular use of a handheld camera, and the lack of many cuts really makes the sequence feel very fluid, and it adds to the intensity. Definitely solidified my confidence in this movie early on, and it's one of my favorite parts of the whole film. So I mentioned earlier that every quality of this movie is a growth from the first one, but this isn't always the best thing. For instance, a major aspect of the original movie is the hallucinations. Rose sees things that no one else sees and does things that she has no memory of doing. And in the sequel, they really dive deep into this concept. But with the hallucinations, it gets to a point that's a little frustrating. The movie becomes too wrapped up in trying to trick you with plot twists that everything that has previously happened just feels pointless. So without spoilers, a moment that is super critical to the story just gets entirely undone at the end. So what's the point? A lot of the twists are very good, don't get me wrong, but some definitely do more harm than good. But that's about all I have to say for Smile 2. Glad I checked this out. I would definitely recommend it to anyone for a good scary movie, especially if you were a fan of the first one. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, next for October, my final review is It's What's Inside, a sci-fi comedy thriller from Netflix, which flew way under my radar. It follows a group of friends at a pre-wedding party who play a game involving a device that lets them switch bodies. Besides that, the best description I can give it, it's like bodies mixed with an episode of Black Mirror. And I don't think it's controversial to say that I'm naturally skeptical of Netflix originals. They just produce so much middle-of-the-road background noise content that it's hard to get excited about a new Netflix release. However, every once in a while, they lock in and release an unexpected gem, and this is the category that I would put It's What's Inside in. Now, this movie is incredibly stylish. It's so pleasing to the eye. The editing is super creative and adds some humor to certain flashback sequences or energizes the more suspenseful scenes. Also, lots of great uses of color that really makes the movie feel dreamlike. And while I love great style, it's also important to have equally great substance. And I think this movie wears both shoes perfectly. At surface level, the concept of the plot isn't exactly original or groundbreaking. There's been plenty of movies or episodes of TV where a group of characters switch bodies. If you ask my opinion, the Scooby-Doo movie did it best, but I digress. However, it's the characters and the writing that makes this feel fresh. It definitely adopts a Gen Z style of dialogue and humor, which I'm typically pretty apprehensive towards, but it works well in this movie because the actors deliver the lines naturally and it doesn't sound awkward at all. Speaking of the acting, the cast is another shining quality of this film. It's full of pretty unknown names, at least for me. I didn't recognize anyone, but they are all strong in this movie. I think it's very impressive in my eyes because the story revolves around people's personalities being in other people's bodies. So it's super cool for me that there's all these talented actors in this that can play different characters while also being themselves. Some standouts from the cast for me are David Thompson, who plays kind of a Gen Z mad scientist equivalent. He just has a sort of off-putting vibe and a crooked smile. And he just has a lot of fun with his character, who is one of my favorites. Another favorite of mine is Brittany O'Grady. She's listed first on every cast list I looked at, so I guess you could call her the protagonist, even though I think pretty much everyone in the friend group has pretty equal amounts of screen time. But I think she goes through the most. She kind of has a personality change about halfway through, and I think the actress portrays both versions of this character very well. So all in all, I would say do not sleep on this like I did. I definitely don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you're not a big horror movie fan, but you want something kind of spooky for Halloween. I would highly recommend It's What's Inside. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, transitioning into the movie news. In our first piece of news, Wicked has been on a hot streak with its marketing campaign. This is the film adaptation of the widely loved Broadway musical, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, and Michelle Yeoh. So far, marketing from the film has included Lego sets, Mattel dolls, Starbucks drinks, Spotify playlists, Funko Pops, makeup products, Target exclusive merchandise, and more. I think it's safe to say it's going to be pretty much impossible to not know about this movie. I mean, pink and green is everywhere. But interestingly enough, one key detail about the movie that I haven't seen in much of the promotion at all is that it's part one of a two-part adaptation. This is only Act 1, which to me is a little weird. I mean, it's not titled Wicked Act 1 or Part 1, and the trailers make no indication of a cliffhanger or Part 2. For the most part, it seems like its own standalone movie. Not to mention it's 160 minutes for Part 1. But anyway, apart from the collaborations, Universal has also been going strong with traditional marketing, with lots of trailers and posters coming out. Speaking of which, there was one poster in particular that stirred up some controversy. It was supposed to pay homage to the original Broadway poster, but some fans were unhappy with some differences in the design, leading to different fan edits and transformations. Now, this made the lead actress Cynthia Erivo pretty mad, causing her to go on Instagram and say that the edits are deeply hurtful and degrading because they cover her eyes. Personally, I don't think it's that serious. I think the graphic design team didn't cover her face for better brand recognition, not for some deep, meaningful reason like she claims, but I'm very sorry she feels that way. Personally, I'm excited for the movie. I've seen the criticisms, but I don't think it looks that bad. I'm interested to see what it's like. Wicked is in theaters November 22nd. Alright, the next and only other piece of news. The first trailer for The Brutalist has been released, starring Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, and Guy Pearce. The Brutalist tells the story of a visionary architect and his wife who flee post-war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern America. That's from IMDb. So, this film has been widely praised by critics following its multiple releases in various film festivals in the past couple months or so. Currently has a 97% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. And while the trailer doesn't release much about the film itself, it highlights its accolades and has been praised for its graphic design. It's short and sweet, just over the 1 minute mark, but it pairs some stunning clips with some great music, and it's gotten me very excited for this release. However, I have a bone to pick, not just with this film, but with a wider issue at hand. The Brutalist is being produced and distributed by A24, which has become widely loved for their catalog of films over the past couple years. But an enormous flaw with A24 that causes lots of their new releases to be dead in the water upon release is their distribution. Some of their more recent films have been limited to select theater releases, which heavily diminishes the amount of people who are able to see it, which creates very little word of mouth. And A24 recently has not been the best at marketing their films, so word of mouth does a lot of heavy lifting. I'm definitely very interested in seeing this movie, considering the hype around it, but I really hope I'll be able to check it out. That's The Brutalist in select theaters, December 20th. And finally, just to wrap up, some movies releasing in November that I have not previously mentioned include Juror Number 2, Clint Eastwood's next and maybe final movie, a courtroom drama starring Nicholas Hoult, A Real Pain, a family dramedy starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, Small Things Like These starring Cillian Murphy, produced by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, Conclave, a story about a conspiracy revolving around the selection of the new pope, starring Ralph Fiennes. I've heard some Oscar conversations about that one. Next, Gladiator 2, Ridley Scott's sequel starring Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, and more. And finally, Moana 2, the sequel to the 2016 Disney musical classic. And that's about it for this month's episode. I want to thank you so much for listening this far. Stay tuned next month for the November episode to hear about what I watch and what I want to talk about. And have a great day.